So in Module 1, we covered how the music business works and how money and revenue is created through royalties and different types of ways that artists can generate their revenue. But now comes the most essential element to creating a music career, and that is establishing your brand, creating your artist DNA, understanding who you are as an artist. Because honestly, without this, you're pretty much wandering around without a compass and not necessarily knowing where you're going to go. And it makes it that much harder to really strive to reach some of the goals that you have for yourself as an artist. Now, usually when people start a business, and I like to use this comparison, when somebody's about to start a business, they start with knowing how much they have to invest or counting the cost, basically. They know that if I'm going to do a brick and mortar or if I'm doing something, it's going to count X amount of dollars, or this is what I need to do in order to generate profit. And the difference between a musician or an artist who is passionate about music is that they don't ever start at the beginning process and think, okay, I'm going to be a musician, or I love music, therefore I need to write my mission statement, I need to count the costs, I need to realize all these things. No, you usually stumble into it because you start by just tinkering around and working at your passion, or picking up an instrument and just playing. And then over some time, you've developed a stronger skill set in that instrument or what it is that you're doing. And then what tends to happen is you've never really given thought as to how you properly are going to make a career out of this. You just kind of stumbled into it. Well, that's the thing. The business person starts out with understanding where they need to go, how can they generate revenue. If they are serious about having a successful business, they would be doing this. So what sets apart between the musician and the business model is that the musician fumbles into it, and then down the road, they're like scratching their head, confused as to why isn't this really working for me? How come I'm hitting a brick wall here? And how do I necessarily create this into a career? And so that's what we're going to talk about. And this is at the crossroads. This is where it really starts to happen, when you start to discover who you are as an artist and define yourself as the artist, so that you then know who the audience is that you're going to be sharing your message with through your music. So let's start with discovering your artist DNA. Now, if you've been a musician or an artist for a while, this is probably important for you too. You might think, well, I know who I am and I'm confident within myself as an artist, but make sure that you're covering all the bases, because just because you have a foundation laid down and you built a house on top of it doesn't necessarily mean that the house will be stable for the long term. So you want to make sure you have a healthy, strong foundation in place first. So your artist DNA is made up of 3 strands. And the way I like to break it down is your sonic niche. This is really going to focus in on your direction, on your sound, and what makes it unique about your music. And sonically, where do you fit in the whole spectrum of music? And then your fan avatar. Who is the audience that you're trying to connect with through that music? And then your brand lifeline. These are the 3 strands that make up the artist DNA. The brand lifeline is going to expand a little bit on the different avenues and almost like the windows into who you are as the artist, that builds a stronger bond and connection with the audience that you're building. So let's focus in on your sonic niche, finding your sound. And if you ever wondered, I don't really know what my sound is as an artist, well, here's a clear way to help get there. Now, the question that seems to confuse more than direct you in where you should be going is, what does your music sound like? And I get this all the time, and I like to ask this question a lot when I'm talking at workshops and clinics, or just having one-on-ones with up-and-coming artists and alike. And so what I do is I ask them, what does your music sound like? And I typically get this response, well, it's a cross between hardcore polka and, metal mixed a little bit with some reggae. And I'm like, okay, sure. And what that does is it places the burden completely on the consumer, or me, to figure out what that sounds like. And I can't really put a firm grip on that. And so you're already starting the conversation with that fan in confusion. Like, okay. And I get it. I get the intent of, if it's a little bit of reggae, a little bit of pop, a little bit of 80s, I understand that. But if you can narrow it down, clear the fog, and be very specific and detailed as to what artists are influencing your sound, it's going to make it that much easier to connect a stronger bond with the audience member. So, what top 3 musical influences shape the signature sound for you? Not what does your music sound like, but who shapes your sound. So I'm going to give you an example of this. Instead of saying, my music sounds like cross of hip hop, pop, and trap. Well, that now I'm still confused as to what exactly that sounds like. But if you were to ask me, what does my music sound like? And I came back to you and said, well, if you're a fan of Jay-Z, Mos Def, and Jay Dilla, then you'll love my music. Now, what I just did there was I gave you a clear, direct path with 3 other artists that if you can resonate and connect with any of these 3 artists, you will automatically be an instant, fan of what I'm doing. So think about that. It's like attending school for the first time, the first day of school. You know nobody in this brand new school. And you sit down at the cafeteria or wherever it is that you have lunch, and the person the person that sits next to you has a lunchbox with your favorite TV show. Maybe it's Star Wars or whatever. And you're like, wow, you like that show too? And instantly, because of that common connection, the two of you hit it off and become friends. And that's the similar effect that you're trying to do with your music. Hey, if you're a fan of Metallica, Megadeth, and Pantera, you're going to love what I do. And so, hey, I like Metallica. So immediately that I like Metallica is a connection that I can establish, and I'm not trying to figure out what that sound is like. So you want to narrow down as to influence. And we're going to talk about the difference between influence and inspiration. But essentially, influence is going to trim the fat, get all the urge to want to do everything for everybody, and focus in on exactly the lane that you should be in. This is going to give you that laser beam focus that you need to really nail down your sound. And if you're thinking, well, what if I like more than 3 artists? Well, that's a given. We're easily influenced by more than just 3 artists. But if you can narrow it down to 3, now you're thinking the same way that Spotify or Pandora thinks, because they base your music based on an algorithm of other artists that are related to your sound. Think about it. If that's the primary source of how current streaming and future streaming would be, then you need to start thinking that same way too, so that you can narrow down your lane, and it's going to be that much easier to locate the fan avatar and the fan and the audience that you're trying to reach. So how does this practically get played out? Let's talk about the difference between influence and inspiration. Now, what I mean by influence, I mean those artists that have really stirred that passion in you to even want to pursue the music that you're currently pursuing. I'll never forget the day I heard The Prodigy, the electronic music group, and I was just blown away. I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. And so they became a huge influence in me, and they're a part of my musical artist DNA. Even though I'm making pop records, the way and the mindset I have about going in my sound design and the way I structure things they play a big part in that. And so think about that artist that has influenced you, that really has like moved you into, man, they helped shape the reason why I wanted even to go into music. Because then what tends to happen is you're going to be unique. And I get a lot of people asking, yeah, but I don't want to sound like them. I don't want to sound like another Drake or something like that. They will never be a you, and you will never be a they. And what I mean by that is when 2 people come together, when mom and dad come together to make, when their chromosomes come together, they make you. They make a unique individual, yet influenced by mom and dad, but yet still a unique person. And that's sort of the same thing that happens in the artist DNA. And I like that whole spin of the DNA situation, is that you're going to become a unique artist, but yet you now know the lane that you need to navigate in, because the trouble and frustration that happens to a lot of artists is that they get stuck not knowing, should I chase what's hot right now, or should I do dubstep if I really want to do tropical house? If this is going to get rid of all that and focus in, okay, this is my lane, this is what this is where I'm going to stay in. And so inspiration, and the difference between the inspiration, means that if you take a trip to Morocco and you come back home, it's like, man, I heard some amazing music there. I want to incorporate that inspiration, incorporate that into a song, or incorporate that into some of my production, certain instruments and things like that. Or I heard a song on the radio and that inspired me and I want to kind of move in that direction. But still, the fingerprint behind everything you do is through the influence. So those are the differences, because I've got a lot of people who said, man, if I stay in this 3 artist lane, I'm going to be put in a box. Not necessarily. You have the focus on who you are as an artist, and now you can be inspired by an infinite amount of different types of inspiration that comes into your life and incorporate that into your music. So I hope that makes sense with making the distinction between the influence and the inspiration for your artist DNA. So here's a practical next step. Go ahead and make a list of artists that have or are currently influencing you and try your best to narrow it down to just the top 3. Now, trust me, I know you can have a scroll about 50 feet long of all the artists that have influenced you, but narrow it down to the 3 because it's really going to help in focusing in on the lane, especially when communicating to your audience what your music sounds like. Then find a common ground between the 3 artists and use that to help navigate the sound. So for instance, if I went back and said, if you're a fan of Jay-Z, Mos Def, and Jay Dilla, you're going to love the music I'm making. And so there's a commonality between the 3. And if I could just pinpoint it, so it might be some, throwback hip hop, maybe some using a lot of breakbeat loops and things like that, like the Jay Dilla, it's got that swing in it. And, maybe the concept or the type of flow that Jay-Z uses is one that I like to create. So I'm finding the common thread, and that's going to help me kind of pinpoint it and narrow it down just a bit. Remember, it will be unique. Why? Because it's your perspective, it's your music, and it's ultimately your message that you're sharing with the world. There's just a common thread. That's because of the influence. But like I said, it's uniquely different and it's uniquely you. And that's what you need to focus in on, because that's going to make a real clear distinction as to which audience and your fan avatar, which we're going to get into next, and how they can magnetically be attracted to what you're doing. So now let's go ahead and talk about the second strand of your artist DNA, your fan avatar. Your fan avatar is the picture of your perfect fan. Who are they? What do they look like? And the more specific you can be about the audience, the much better off you are. And in order to get that picture of that perfect fan, you will need to write specific traits of what your perfect fan looks like and be as specific as possible. We see this kind of strategy being used by so many multi-million-dollar companies. And why? Because it actually makes sense. You want to step into a room filled with the people that are eager to listen to what you have to say. So you can either step in a gymnasium filled with a bunch of people and share your music, where some of them might be, resonant to what you have to say through your music, or you can step into a smaller room and have everybody in that room eager to turn around to hear what you have to say. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have you deliver your message in the right room. A lot of times people think, if I can get my music out to the most people possible, if I can just yell off the mountaintops, then because of just sheer numbers, I'm bound to have a big fan base. And that's a lot of times what major record labels are doing. They're just throwing a lot of money, a lot of cash, and hoping that by casting big nets, they can reel in enough people that'll be attracted to the certain artists that they're marketing or promoting. Well, now you have to somewhat think and work smarter and not necessarily harder. Why do that when you could just, have a smaller group of people who can resonate with who you are as an artist and have a bigger impact in their lives than trying to cast a huge net to a lot of people where you'll get somewhat of a decent response. So we want to focus in on specific questions that can help narrow down who that audience and that perfect fan avatar is. You could use the questions below to dig deeper in understanding your target micro niche audience. You can ask things to them like, what artists are you currently listening to? Where are you mostly listening to your music? Pandora, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes. Because if your audience is living on YouTube, guess where you're going to start living on? YouTube. If your artist is on Snapchat and listening and consuming content there, well, that's where you're going to spend a lot of your time. If your audience is on Spotify mostly, then there's a unique strategy to connect with the audience there. Not to say you won't be on on all the platforms, but you're going to have a unique, specific strategy catered to the specific platform in which your audience is currently connecting to music with. Ask them, where are you mostly discovering your music? Same options as above. It could even be the same place, but you can't assume that they're discovering music in the same place that they're consuming their music. They might have heard something on the radio and be like, what is that? And go to Spotify to just consume it. Or they might, Shazam, or they might, I was on YouTube the other day, found this crazy video, and I wanted to look it up on Spotify. So that, different stuff. And when was the last time? And these are all questions to start asking some of your audience. And if you don't have, if you're starting with zero, like you have no fans whatsoever, then just ask the closest people in your life. Maybe ask these questions to the closest 5 people in your life and ask them this, so you get an understanding and perspective, those closest to you, where they're experiencing music. So when was the last time you purchased music from an artist with whom you experienced a personal or direct connection with, and why? Now that's an important question to ask, because if you think about it and even answer that question yourself, you kind of connect with, man, the last time I bought music from an artist I really connected with was, 4 years ago on this platform. So, narrow it down and get them thinking about this, because you're going to really get a better understanding of how they're connecting with that artist and what was it that triggered them to actually make that purchase. How do you connect the best with those closest in your life? Like, how do you connect with your siblings? How do you connect with your friends? Is it through Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Google+, Instagram, Hala Wala, whatever it is that you're using? Get in the dirt with understanding how they are connecting with those closest in their lives. And how often do you go out to see new artists perform? Get down to the age group and demographic. This is all helpful information that you want to incorporate into understanding who your fan is. Do they shop somewhere specific? Does your fan wear a specific brand? You want to tap into the lifestyle that you would commonly see your fan live. If it's a female, how do they do their hair? Like, what do they look like? Like, literally take some time and fashion your fan avatar, because then you have a better understanding of what they look like. Don't make the assumption, don't just assume that because you consume music a certain way or you're doing things a certain way that your fans are exactly the same. Like I said before, you need to understand where they're at so that you can meet them at that place and create a bridge so that they can connect to you as the artist, not necessarily your music. Your music is now a bridge. It's a catalyst in which they're going to cross over that bridge so that they become more aware of who you are as an artist, which is really going to help with our next strand of our artist DNA, and that's the brand lifeline. Now, once you've created your fan avatar and you know the audience that you're trying to connect with, now we got to focus on building your brand lifeline, which is going to help create a stronger bond and ultimate stronger connection with that audience. So your brand lifeline acts as windows which your fans can have a clear picture of who you are as an artist. You're not just a music vending machine, and this happens a lot. Sometimes artists just simply, all they do is just nonstop, check out my new single, check out my new music, check out new music, check out new music. And you just become this vending machine that all you're really doing is just pitching your music. And people around you are just already somewhat ticked off. I'm like, all right, dude, that's it. But you're just this one-dimensional machine, and all you're doing is spewing out music. What you need to consider are 2 other areas in your life besides your music in which they can connect to you as the artist. The music is really essentially, like I mentioned earlier, a bridge in which they cross over to get more familiar with who you are as the artist. And that's the ultimate goal here. And I can't stress this enough, that when these 3 strands are put together in place, it makes that much more of an impact in building a music career. So what are other 2 areas in your life that can allow you to build a stronger connection with your audience? So let me give you an example. There was an artist that I was working with, and he was struggling with getting a healthy fan base developed. So when we got to the brand lifeline portion of the artist DNA, a light bulb just flickered on, because he realized all he's been doing was promoting his music. So I asked him, what are 2 other areas in your life that, what are some hobbies? Who are you? What are some things that you like to do? So he talked, well, I surf and I also like to paint. I go, that's amazing. That needs to be highlighted in who you are as an artist. So what we started to do was start promoting the type of sex wax he used on his surfboards and where he likes to surf, and caught a great wave today. Do any of you guys surf out there, and where are you surfing right now? And then and then the paint, like, hey, this is using these colors, these pastel colors have been really great. Love painting. What do you guys think about this painting? And we also use that to the advantage of, hey, every month we're gonna give away a painting that I've painted. Used Instagram contests and things like that. But you started to see what happened, and we started flipping the script. and then we started promoting the music. What started to happen were a lot of fans were that also surfed, that also liked his paintings, were starting to engage a lot, and they were connecting on a deeper level. They also gravitated to his music much more frequently, just because they already had 2 other areas in their life that they connected with him as an artist, as a person. So that's what started to happen, and we started to see the shift where now he was promoting a lot more of the other areas of his lifestyle, the 2 other the brand lifelines, and the music just became not just secondary, but it just became something to kind of glue everything together. And that's what we need to be doing. So you have your music, but you also like to take photos, right? Maybe you're a photographer on the side, or something you found as an interest, and you surf, like the example I just gave with the artist. Those 3 areas, they make up your brand lifeline. And you will focus on spending about 80% on the other 2 and 20% promoting your music. If you're into, if you like movies and you like classic 80s or 90s movies, and you start posting some of your favorite quotes from these movies, and there's a lot of people who connect and like that stuff too. So you want to get that there. You want to start promoting that as well, because then they get to see another side of you, and they start to connect with you as a person. And then they kind of cross over that bridge of your music that you're promoting and should be giving away free, because then they walk over that and realize, wow, I'm really into you as an artist. I really love who you are and what you're about. And that converts a typical just regular fan to a hardcore tribe member, which is the ultimate goal. That's what we want to do. We want to convert fans to tribe members. So what are the 2 areas of your life that you can bring into focus that will allow your fans to also connect with you? Remember, the goal here is not to be everything to everybody, but to find those fans that will become hardcore tribe members. So if you're thinking, well, won't that exclude like a lot of people? Well, yeah, and that's great. I'd rather filter out the people who are somewhat okay about who I am as an artist, and then attract and magnetically pull in those who are on board with what I like and who I'm all about. So, if I'm posting my surfing stuff and my photo stuff and people are like, I'm not really into it, that's fine. I don't want you to be into it. So that's okay if you're not going to become a part of what I'm doing. That's cool. I'm filtering you out. I only want to attract those who are really going to be committed to what I'm putting out there, because then eventually, with the next couple steps in marketing your music, you're going to effectively transform them from a typical regular fan to a tribe member that will ultimately support you as the artist, not just your music, but you and everything you do.